from the book The Silent Self. The mind has been studied and talked about for millennia, yet it remains a mystery as to what it is, where it is, why it operates the way it does, and how it produces what we call thoughts and emotions. But the most overlooked factor in all this is that even though we cannot fully understand the mind, we can perceive it at work. Awareness can traverse the mind's caverns, valleys, and peaks. When you realize the significance of this, the mind and its contents become less important. Your concern turns increasingly to the matter of transcendence. Instead of surfing wave after wave in the hope of finally understanding your mind and identity, you lift into the air as pure presence. Question. The fourth way system also talks about food, air, and impressions. How do these affect awareness? The head, chest, and abdomen are the three stories of the human machine as described in the fourth way. The abdomen absorbs food. The chest absorbs air. The mind absorbs impressions of light and sound. Each of these foods enters through our head, through the mouth, the nose, and the eyes and ears. From there, though, they settle into their respective sections of the body to be absorbed. The idea is that these three kinds of matter get distilled in different stories, but only up to a point that serves survival and procreation. To be further distilled, their energy needs to be mixed with consciousness itself. This is particularly true of the impressions of sound and even more of light, because whereas the body automatically distills food and air, it barely registers impressions of sight and sound. These impressions can be absorbed far more consciously if we know how to add the influence of consciousness itself. Question. Are essence and personality different dimensions? Yes, in the sense that they are different dimensions in and through which consciousness manifests. Essence is a higher, finer, lighter dimension. Personality is a lower, denser, and heavier dimension. Negative emotions are even more dense and more heavy. And conscious awareness is the lightest and purest of all. The model of the ray of creation in the fourth way system enunciates these distinctions. It gives you a clear map with which to comprehend the mechanical dissolution and conscious resolution of the fundamental substance comprising the universe. There are not many maps like this. Question. Why do we feel the need to be liked and admired? Essence wants to be nurtured, but not for the sake of identity. It wants to be nurtured so as to be cultivated as the seed case of consciousness. There is an innate wish, you could say, to become more of what it is as the potential of consciousness. But very quickly, due to its tendency to become identified, essence starts to conceive of itself in relation to other people. And from there it forms as a sense of identity that learns to insulate itself with increasing layers of identity. As this happens, our innate wish to be nurtured as what we really are as essence turns into a need to be paid attention to, accepted, liked, and admired as a person and personality. In most cases, the hurt we feel when our needs are not met is a reaction of personality. Deep inside the insulation of personality, the core of essence is usually fine. It is just asleep, dormant. And the truth is that essence itself never needed to be admired or liked. That is not what the true nature of essence is about. Question: You mean self-remembering? Yes. For instance, as you look at me and listen to me, notice that you can be aware of looking and listening. Notice that you can be aware behind your eyes and inside your ears. Normally, we leave this perch inside, go out to meet what we see or hear, and then cling to that. We do the same thing with our thoughts and emotions and bodily sensations. Self-remembering refers to consciousness staying in its perch and realizing that it is staying here. This has many nuances that you have to discover for yourself, but this is how it begins. Question: I get confused about who or what is trying to self-remember. This is partly because self-remembering has degrees. It can be physical, it can be psychological, it can be metaphysical. In the body and mind, it is experienced as a concentration of attention in one or more of the four centers. In consciousness, it is purely a realization of awareness. It might help when you're trying to self-remember to notice that you are trying to do it. Be aware of that too. There is another degree of self-remembering that comes as you release identification with the effort to self-remember. Question: The sense of me and my life feels so real. How can I see through this? Behind all of our thoughts and feelings, there is an ingrained belief about our life, its past, its future, and our sense as a person in relation to this reel of film. But it is all a series of images springing from the central pivot of I. These images in turn generate thoughts and emotions that keep the notion of being a person intact. When you peel them away, you come to the psychological foundation of I, which is awareness identified with and believing itself to be I. If you manage to look beneath this foundation, there is no identity. There is just being, which is what you are at your deepest core. But consciousness usually passes through the human form without being aware of itself as consciousness. Question: How can I keep my mind from racing with thoughts? There's a tiny switch that enables you to keep attention in the present, focused on what is right here in front of you, whatever you're doing. No one can flip this switch for you. You have to find it for yourself. And above all, you have to want to flip it. It is not a struggle against thoughts in the arena of the mind. It is a focus of awareness. You can think of it as a perch on a rock in the middle of a torrential river. Instead of trying to calm the waters of your mind, find this perch in yourself and try to get accustomed to the view from there. Question: Does that also apply to the problems in my life? All problems are in the mind. They are just mental configurations, nothing more. These configurations are attached to the sense of I being projected in the mind, and they usually take on the flavor of what the fourth way calls our chief feature. In reality, they are just clouds in the mind. Pressures still exist in your life, but problems are all imaginary. Try to see the difference. If you take I out of the equation, what happens to the problem? When you are not identified with the problem, how does it change? Try to spend a day facing all the problems in your life without seeing them as problems. Question: but aren't some worries and fears legitimate? The simple truth is that from the perspective of pure being, there is nothing to be afraid of or to worry about. All of it is mind activity, mental turmoil. Pure being is no mind. The ultimate goal, if it can be called that, is to be entirely free of me, to leave I behind, to see it drift away. The mind can't comprehend what this really means. Question: will it help if I renounce the vanities in my life? Renouncing external things does not lead anywhere. Real renouncement is internal. It means consciousness renouncing the illusion of I. Question: can we see when pure consciousness manifests itself? Pure consciousness does not manifest directly in the dimensions of the mind and body. It manifests through them. The mind and body can at best reflect the influences of consciousness that echo through them. Your question shows how the mind keeps trying to grasp, pin down, and conclude the nature of consciousness. But it can never do that. Only consciousness can know itself. Somehow you have to come to this realization. It has to dawn on you, like the sun dawning on the horizon of your mind. Question: why does the ego dislike other people? Because by invalidating others, it validates itself. The ego likes and dislikes, approves and disapproves, admires and judges, all based on its idea of itself and on its idea of other people in relation to its idea of itself. Everyone is subject to this tendency, which makes for a bizarre masquerade that is the story of humanity. It is primarily a story of egos, of ghosts. Question: what distinction do you draw between consciousness and pure being? Pure being is the source of consciousness, the silent backdrop of consciousness, from which awareness emerges. The deepest meaning of know thyself is for this bedrock to consciously recognize, realize, and affirm itself, not as an entity or identity, but as the unmanifest source of being. This is why I refer to it as the lake bed. All thoughts and emotions and sensations are fish in the lake, and awareness is the lake they swim in. Pure being is the lake bed, without which the lake could not be. Most of the time, we are preoccupied with the fish, unaware of the lake, and oblivious to the lake bed. Question: how can we move closer to the unmanifest? By becoming more and more interested in what is perceiving all this. Not about what is perceived, and not about I as the perceiver, but about the perceiving itself and the source of perceiving, that which makes awareness possible in the first place. What is that? Do you know it in the deepest part of your being? And what might it be like to live from there? Question: when I asked about consciousness manifesting itself, I mean in the sense of seeing that we are aware. What we call awareness can be conscious of seeing things and be conscious of being conscious of seeing things and be conscious of the fact that it is conscious of being conscious. There is also a place, what Huang Po called the place of precious things, beyond all of these dimensions, which sees each of them. Question: when you talk like that, the jungle of my thoughts gets more wild and confused. Thoughts seem real, but they are not. They are mental vapor. This is true not only of thoughts, but of all our feelings and conclusions and points of view. They are all nothing in comparison to consciousness and the pure being at the source of consciousness. They are just noise generated by the four centers. At any time, we can drop them by dropping the ego that has gathered around them and be totally free, at peace. Thoughts hold us prisoner only because we want them to. You have to stop wanting them to. You have to stop believing that the jungle is you. Question: what do you mean by mental vapor? Like fog, you will discover that it's possible to see through your entire inner world, including the ego experiencing this inner world, as though you are seeing through a mist. You see that there's nothing solid about it. From there, you settle as the void of pure consciousness. Question: if more people become more conscious, can we end the turmoil on earth? Within organic life on earth, and possibly within the entire universe, only humans appear to be in turmoil. Why? Because of the ego as an artificial sense of I. Take I away and see what happens. Imagine humanity without it. At the same time, it's interesting to consider that the ego is part of the psychological design of this human form, and that mankind is meant to live in turmoil and to suffer. According to the fourth way, this can serve two distinct purposes, one mechanical and one conscious. It is easy to suppose that it would be nice to get rid of the suffering on earth, but that is a short-sighted view. Question: are mind and ego essentially the same thing? When we are identified, yes. Thoughts arise as reflected images inside the mind. When consciousness identifies with these images, it becomes the ego. When it does not identify with these images, it realizes itself beyond the mind that is reflecting them. This can also happen in reverse, when consciousness suddenly realizes itself and sees thoughts as nothing more than images within the structure of the mind. Question: do good deeds make a difference? Many people have been taught and cling to the delusion that they will be rewarded at death for having lived their life as a good person, which means different things in different cultures. But this is just a mental concept which the ego indulges in for comfort. It does not mean, however, that you should freely indulge in bad deeds. It means that the notion of me as a good or bad person is just a notion that has nothing to do with consciousness or the transformation of consciousness. In esoteric Christianity, good refers to conscious awareness, and evil refers to identification. Question: are we, as the person, to any degree real? Ultimately, no. Only consciousness is real. Everything else is temporal form that will evaporate sooner than you think. Even the genuine feeling of I, speaking as an ambassador for consciousness, is not the real thing. It is, at best, a reflection of consciousness. What is causing the reflection cannot be seen or heard or touched, which is why it goes unnoticed by most people most of the time. Question: can you say more about the source of awareness? The most astonishing thing about our existence is that we can be aware of it. Yet this goes unnoticed. Isn't that odd? We can be aware of everything inside the psychological world and outside in the physical universe. And yet all the things that we can be aware of are not aware of themselves. The only question then becomes, what is this which can be aware of everything else? And what does it mean for it to be conscious of itself? How is that possible? What makes it possible? Is there something else behind and beyond this capacity to be aware? How might that source be investigated and realized? The only way to do that is with conscious awareness. It all begins and ends with this capacity we call awareness, which has the potential to go deeper and deeper and deeper into itself as itself.